I'm Scott Moore with Northway Solutions Group, and I'm going over the LoadRunner Virtual User Generator, or Vugen, for version 11, Service Pack 4. We're in the web protocol. Our first video got us to the point where we're a more advanced user and we're using the script view. So this gets us to the script view from the default tree view. Now let's take a look at these recording options that are part of the web protocol. Let's start up here, the very first one. I've had a lot of people in classes ask me about this very first thing that you see up here for the C language. Okay, Scott, I understand I'm in the HTTP protocol, but what if I wanted to create this web script using Java or .NET? Well, C is the only thing that's supported for this type of virtual user for this protocol, if you will. So you can't use anything other than C, which is why it's hard-coded and it's not available. Does that mean that there is no other availability ever? That's not true. It's not true. It is true for the web protocol, but if you were to open up a COM/DCOM virtual user and you look at the recording options for it, you'll notice you do have a drop-down box and you have several different choices that you can use to create that type of virtual user. So it's not that it's not available at all, it's just not available for that protocol. Okay, let's go back and take a look at some of these things I've set. This is not the default values at this point. I like to select the option to close the application under test, my web application, when I push the stop button on the recording bar. So that shuts it down nice and clean. You don't have to do that if you're like recording in the middle of a business process or whatever and you want to hook into a specific one. It's all up to you how you want to do this. This is just what I use as best practice. I will set a fixed think time after the end of a transaction that's put in with a value of 5. I like to go into my script after the fact, add my own think times with my own hard-coded values in there, and then create some randomization using the runtime settings, and that's a different discussion altogether, but it's part of my overall methodology of where to put think times, how to put the right amounts in there, and how to create the randomization for advanced users and beginning users. Sometimes I will select to create a recorded events log, sometimes I won't. I will generate a think time greater than a wait time of 3 seconds. Sometimes that backfires on me, but I'll usually set that somewhere between 3 and 5 seconds. 3 or 5 seconds, if you will. Don't like to limit the number of lines in my action file, and this is on by default and just continues to track activity if a sub-process kicks off as a local COM server. So I leave all of that checked. Obviously we're using the web protocol, but if you were working in a multi-protocol situation where you had, say, web and Citrix or web and something else, you might have some options here to uncheck. This option is pretty important. There are two major types of recording hooking engines, if you will. One is the HTML based, and notice that when you hold your pointer over a particular area, you get a context based help on that feature. So it generates a step for each user action for a request that is not basic HTML and whose origin is not basic HTML, record explicit request. So by default, this option, a script describing user actions with a web link function. If you're not familiar with the difference between a web link function and a web URL function, go to the function reference guide. It's all there. There's examples. You're going to have to read the manual at some point in time. Now's a good time to start. Here is an example of a script that was recorded using a pet shop application, and you'll notice it was recorded with that mode. So best practice would be use the default. If that works, great. If it doesn't, second option will be to record a script containing explicit URLs. So here, instead of using web links and web submit forms where it understands the context of the page, now we're going to get more information within our URL and our form submissions, it's going to cause us to have to do more correlation, but that's okay. So for example, in this particular script, had it not been recorded that way, you may not have seen these XY coordinates, which make no difference whatsoever in the form submission. It's just another value that's being tracked behind the scenes. A lot of times you'll see the hidden form values when you turn on that explicit URL, which you may only need that. Basic difference between HTML-based recording and URL-based is HTML-based does understand the context. So what that means is it grabs the page and everything on it. So if your developers make a front-end change, like they rename a GIF image on a page, it will not necessarily break your script. If you're recording with URL based, we used to call this analog mode, it actually has to go out for each resource on that page. Every image, every style sheet, everything is a separate step. It has to understand, it doesn't understand anything within context. It treats it as it's totally independent and separately. It has less of a memory footprint within Vugen, but these are scripts that are less maintainable. But sometimes there are difficult applications where only URL-based scripting will work for you, and sometimes it can only be done using web custom request only. So look at the help that's part of that feature. It says for non-browser applications, set this option to record all HTTP requests from the web server as a custom HTTP request, disregarding all context. So every single step is like its own unique, like it's the only step in that application. Sometimes that is the only way that it will work, and then you have to do more correlation on your side. And in that case, should a developer replace a GIF image and rename it, it will break your script. So in that sense, they are less maintainable. So you have to use some other tricks and tips to make them more maintainable when you're using URL based. So that gets us through the first three. I'll continue on in our next segment going through the rest of the recording options. As always, your feedback is welcome. We have a blog page at blog.northwaysolutions.com where we're putting out a lot of Vugen code and helpful hints and tips. We have a comment section. We'd love to hear from you, and you can check us out at northwaysolutions.com.